Maya Johnson sat alone at a small table in the corner of the bustling restaurant, a glass of Merlot cradled in her hand. The warm glow of the overhead lights illuminated her face, reflecting the pride she felt after a long day presiding over cases in her courtroom. The aroma of garlic and herbs wafted through the air, mingling with the laughter and chatter of diners enjoying their evening. She took a moment to savor the peaceful ambience, a sharp contrast to the frenetic energy of her work as a judge. "Just one more glass to celebrate," she murmured to herself, raising her glass in a silent toast to her achievements. Her thoughts drifted to the cases she had successfully resolved, the lives she had impacted positively. She was proud of her role, proud to be a voice for justice in her community. As she took a sip, the doors swung open with a force that cut through the restaurant's melody. Officer Jake Thompson stepped inside, his uniform crisp and his demeanor tense. He scanned the room with a scrutinizing gaze, his eyes landing on Maya. The moment lingered, the air thickening with an unspoken tension. Maya's heart sank as she felt the weight of his scrutiny. Something in his posture, the way he stood there, made her uneasy. "Can I help you, officer?" Maya called out, attempting to break the silence that hung between them. The other diners had begun to notice the interaction, their conversations fading into whispers. Jake approached her table, his expression a mix of determination and suspicion. "I need to ask you some questions," he declared, his voice firm. "You were seen coming out of a known drug area earlier today. Can I see some identification?" Maya's heart raced. "Excuse me? I'm a judge," she replied, her voice steady despite the rising tide of anxiety. She reached for her wallet, pulling out her badge, the emblem glinting under the restaurant's lights. "This should clarify who I am." But Jake's eyes narrowed, his resolve hardening. "I don't care what you say. Just because you wear a robe doesn't mean you're above the law." His tone dripped with condescension, and murmurs rippled through the restaurant as patrons began to take notice. "Is this really necessary?" "I've done nothing wrong," Maya countered, trying to maintain her composure. Her heart pounded as she felt the eyes of the room on her, the weight of judgment pressing down. "Then why were you in that area?" Jake pressed, his voice rising slightly, drawing more attention. "People like you are often involved in these kinds of activities." "I'm just doing my job." "People like me?" Maya echoed, her voice a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You're making an assumption based solely on my race. This is unacceptable." Jake seemed unfazed, his gaze cold and unwavering. "I'm just asking questions, ma'am. If you have nothing to hide, then you shouldn't be worried." Maya felt a surge of humiliation wash over her, a burning heat creeping up her neck. She could see the judgment on the faces of the other diners, their eyes darting from her to Jake. "Look, I understand your duty, but this is a gross overreach. You're embarrassing me in front of everyone." "I'm not embarrassing you. You're embarrassing yourself," he shot back, his voice dripping with disdain. "If you're innocent, prove it. Show me your ID." The tension in the room began to escalate, and as Maya looked around, she noticed the empathy in some eyes and the discomfort in others. She could feel the walls closing in, her dignity being stripped away with every passing second. "This isn't just about me," she said, her voice rising. "This is about the systemic issues that lead to this kind of treatment of people based on their appearance." "Spare me the lecture," Jake interrupted, crossing his arms defiantly. "You can't just play the race card here." Maya took a deep breath, her mind racing. She could feel the weight of the moment, the potential consequences of this confrontation. "I demand to speak to your supervisor," she stated firmly, refusing to back down. Jake hesitated, his bravado faltering for a moment. But then he shook his head, dismissing her request. "This is a waste of my time." As the standoff continued, Maya realized that this incident was more than just a personal affront. It was a reflection of a deeper issue, one that needed to be addressed. She could feel the eyes of the restaurant on her, the need for justice coursing through her veins. And in that moment, she resolved that she would not let this go unchallenged. Maya stepped out of the restaurant, the cool night air hitting her like a splash of cold water. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. As she walked down the dimly lit street, her mind replayed the humiliating encounter with Officer Jake Thompson. The weight of his accusation hung heavy in her chest, but she refused to let it crush her spirit. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking her reverie. It was Lisa. "Hey, Maya, are you okay?" Lisa's voice came through, laced with concern. I'm fine," Maya replied, though her voice wavered slightly. She could still feel the stares of the other patrons as Jake had pointed at her, his voice booming with authority. "No, actually, I'm not fine. You won't believe what just happened." "What happened?" Lisa pressed, her tone shifting from concern to curiosity. Maya found a nearby bench and sat down, her fingers trembling slightly as she recounted the event. "I was having dinner, enjoying a moment of peace, and then he just walked in and accused me of being a criminal. Can you believe that? He didn't even give me a chance to explain who I was." "Are you serious?" Lisa exclaimed, her voice rising in disbelief. "That's outrageous. Did you tell him you're a judge?" "I tried to," Maya said, frustration bubbling up inside her. "But he just kept talking over me, like my words didn't matter. It was like he saw my race and made a snap judgment. I felt so powerless." Lisa paused for a moment, processing the gravity of the situation. "Maya, you have to file a formal complaint. This isn't just about you. It's about holding him accountable. If we don't stand up against this kind of behavior, it'll just keep happening." Maya leaned back against the cold metal of the bench, staring up at the stars that peeked through the city lights. "I know you're right," she replied, her voice steadier now. "But it's just so exhausting. Do I really want to put myself through that? What if they don't believe me?" "They have to believe you," Lisa insisted, her tone firm. "You're a respected judge. You have a duty to stand up for what's right, not just for yourself, but for everyone who has faced this kind of injustice. If you don't do it, who will?" Maya closed her eyes, envisioning the faces of those who had come before her, those who had fought against systemic racism and injustice. She felt a flicker of determination ignite within her. "You're right. This could be a turning point. Maybe it's time to shine a light on these issues, especially in our community." "Exactly. And think about all the people who might feel empowered by your actions," Lisa encouraged. "You could be the voice for so many who feel silenced." The weight of Maya's emotions began to shift, transforming into a sense of purpose. "All right, I'll do it. I'll file the complaint," she said, her voice resolute. "But I want to gather evidence first. I think there were witnesses in the restaurant who saw what happened." "Great idea. Let's start reaching out to them," Lisa replied, her enthusiasm infectious. "You can do this, Maya. You're strong, and you have the law on your side." Maya stood up from the bench, the cool air invigorating her spirit. She took a deep breath, feeling more grounded and determined. "Thank you, Lisa. I really needed this conversation. I won't let this incident define me. Instead, I'll use it to fuel the change I want to see." As they continued to talk, Maya felt a renewed sense of hope. The journey ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it head-on. The incident might have shaken her, but it also ignited a fire within her that she had not realized was there. She was not just a victim. She was a judge, a leader, and a catalyst for change. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the police station, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor as Maya Johnson stepped inside, her heart pounding with a mixture of determination and anxiety. She had replayed the previous day's events 1,000 times in her mind, each time feeling the sting of humiliation, but today she was ready to confront the system that had wronged her. Clad in a tailored navy blazer that spoke of her authority and confidence, she approached the front desk, where a bored officer sat scrolling through his phone. "Excuse me," Maya said, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her stomach. "I'd like to file a complaint regarding Officer Jake Thompson." The officer looked up, his expression shifting from indifference to mild curiosity. "You mean the guy who had that incident at the restaurant yesterday? What's your complaint?" His tone was dismissive, as if he was already preparing to brush her off. Maya took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I was wrongfully accused of being a criminal. Officer Thompson didn't identify himself properly and escalated the situation without justification. I'm here to ensure that this kind of behavior is addressed." The officer raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident in his expression. "You sure you want to pursue this? It's just a misunderstanding, right? I mean, he was just doing his job." Maya felt her frustration bubbling to the surface, but she fought to maintain her composure. "No, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an abuse of power. I am a judge, and I deserve to be treated with respect. This isn't just about me. It's about holding officers accountable for their actions." The officer exchanged a glance with a colleague who had just entered the lobby, and they both shared a quiet chuckle. Maya's cheeks flushed with heat, but she refused to let their mockery deter her. "I would like to speak to a superior, please," she insisted, her voice firm. After a few minutes of waiting, she was led to a small office where Lieutenant Ramirez was seated, reviewing paperwork. He looked up, his expression shifting to one of professionalism as she introduced herself. "Judge Johnson," he said, standing and extending a hand. "I've heard about the incident. Please, have a seat." Maya sat down, feeling a slight sense of relief as she faced a higher authority. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I'm here to file a formal complaint against Officer Thompson for his conduct yesterday." Ramirez nodded, his demeanor more serious now. "I understand this must have been a distressing situation for you. Can you recount what happened?" Maya recounted the incident in detail, her voice gaining strength as she described the humiliation she felt in front of the restaurant patrons. She spoke of the disbelief that coursed through her when Jake had accused her of being a criminal, his words echoing in her mind like a haunting refrain. As she spoke, she noticed Ramirez taking notes, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, Judge," he said, his tone sincere. "We strive to serve and protect all members of our community, and it's clear that this situation fell far short of that goal." Maya felt a flicker of hope at his response. "I want to ensure that this is taken seriously. It's not just about me. It's about preventing this from happening to anyone else." After some more discussion, Ramirez suggested that Maya gather evidence, including contact information for any witnesses who had seen the altercation. "The more information we have, the better we can address this issue," he encouraged. As Maya left the police station, she felt a surge of empowerment. She had taken the first step in a long journey toward justice, and she was determined to see it through. The sun was shining brighter now, almost as if it were celebrating her newfound resolve. Pulling out her phone, Maya called Lisa, her best friend. "You won't believe it. I just spoke to the lieutenant, and he seems to take this seriously. I need to gather witnesses now." "That's amazing, Maya. You're doing the right thing," Lisa replied enthusiastically. "Who did you see in the restaurant? Anyone who can back you up?" "I remember a couple sitting at the table next to me. They looked shocked during the whole thing." "I'll reach out to them," Maya said, her mind racing with the possibilities. "Good idea. And remember, you're not alone in this," Lisa reminded her. "You've got a lot of people on your side." Maya smiled, feeling the warmth of her friend's support. "Thanks, Lisa. I'll keep you posted. I'm going to fight this." With renewed determination, Maya set her sights on gathering evidence and witnesses, knowing that each step she took would not only help her case but also shine a light on the systemic issues that needed addressing. The path ahead was daunting, but she was ready to confront whatever came next. Maya Johnson entered the Internal Affairs Division of the police department with a sense of purpose that coursed through her veins like adrenaline. She clutched a folder filled with evidence, witness statements, security footage, and her own detailed account of the humiliating incident at the restaurant. The walls of the office were stark and sterile, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, as if reminding her of the gravity of her mission. "Judge Johnson," a voice called from behind a desk cluttered with papers. It was Sergeant Amanda Reyes, a no-nonsense officer with a reputation for getting to the bottom of things. She gestured for Maya to take a seat. "Thank you for seeing me, Sergeant," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. "I'm here to formally lodge a complaint against Officer Jake Thompson." Reyes nodded, her expression serious. "I've reviewed your initial report. This isn't just about a misunderstanding, is it?" Maya shook her head, her heart pounding. "No, it's about much more than that. It's about accountability. It's about the systemic issues in our policing that allow officers to act without thinking, to judge based on race rather than facts." The sergeant leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Okay, let's go over what you have." Maya opened the folder, laying out the evidence before Reyes, her hands slightly trembling. As she recounted the details, she felt a renewed sense of empowerment. This was her chance to be heard, to make a difference. Meanwhile, across town, Jake Thompson sat in the break room of the precinct, his hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee. The murmurs of his colleagues surrounded him, but he felt isolated, as if a bubble had formed around him, amplifying the whispers of doubt. "Can you believe he accused a judge?" one officer said, shaking his head. "That was reckless." Jake's jaw tightened. He tried to brush off their comments, but inside, he felt the weight of their scrutiny. "I was just doing my job," he muttered under his breath. But the words felt hollow. Deep down, he knew he had crossed a line. The incident replayed in his mind, haunting him like a specter. He had let his biases dictate his actions, and now he was paying the price. Back at the Internal Affairs Division, Reyes was taking notes, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This footage," she said, pointing to the screen. "It shows you were treated unfairly, but we need more than this to take action against Thompson. We need corroborating testimony." Maya nodded, already anticipating the next steps. "I have several witnesses who were there. I can reach out to them." "Good. I'll also need a formal written statement from you, detailing everything that happened," Reyes instructed. "The more comprehensive your account, the stronger our case will be." "Absolutely," Maya replied, her determination hardening. "I won't let this go. Too many people are afraid to speak up, and it's time that changes." Later that evening, she attended a community meeting at the local church, a humble building filled with familiar faces. As she walked in, she noticed the room buzzing with energy. People were gathered in clusters, discussing everything from school funding to police reform. Maya took a deep breath, her heart racing. This was her chance to share her story and empower others. As she stepped up to the podium, the chatter faded into silence. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began. "I want to talk about something that happened to me recently, an incident involving local law enforcement that shook me to my core." The room listened intently as she recounted her experience with Jake Thompson, her voice steady and resolute. "I was publicly humiliated, treated as a criminal because of the color of my skin. But this isn't just my story. It's a story that many of you might relate to. It's time we stand together against this injustice." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Maya could see the nods of understanding, the shared pain in their expressions. One woman stood up, tears in her eyes. "I faced something similar when I was stopped for no reason last year. It's like they see us as less than human." Maya felt a surge of solidarity. Together, we can demand accountability. We can push for change. We are not just victims. We are a community ready to rise. As she spoke, the energy in the room shifted. Maya was no longer just a judge. She was a beacon of hope, igniting a fire in those who had long felt powerless. The meeting ended with a sense of unity, as people exchanged contact information and pledged to support each other. That night, as Maya lay in bed, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her community. And with each step she took, she was not just reclaiming her dignity but inspiring others to do the same. Maya stood before the large glass windows of her office, gazing out at the bustling city below. The ever-present hum of life continued, yet she felt isolated in her thoughts. The investigation into Officer Jake Thompson's conduct had taken on a life of its own, and with each passing day, the media frenzy surrounding her case grew louder. Reports of racial profiling and police misconduct dominated the headlines, igniting heated debates across the community. As she turned back to her desk, her phone buzzed insistently. It was a message from Lisa. Asterisk, you're on the news again. They're talking about the rally this weekend. You should speak. Asterisk, Maya felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. The rally was an opportunity for her to share her story and advocate for change, but the thought of addressing a crowd made her stomach churn. She quickly texted back, asterisk, I'll think about it. Asterisk. Later that afternoon, she received a call from the Internal Affairs Division, requesting a meeting to discuss the evidence she had gathered against Jake. Her heart raced. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She arrived at the precinct with a folder full of witness statements and recordings, her determination crystallizing with each step she took. Inside the stark, fluorescent-lit room, she was greeted by Detective Harris, a seasoned officer with a stern demeanor. Thank you for coming, Judge Johnson. We appreciate your cooperation in this matter, he said, his tone professional but lacking warmth. Thank you for taking this seriously, Maya replied, forcing herself to meet his gaze. This isn't just about me. It's about accountability and ensuring that this doesn't happen to anyone else. As Maya laid out her evidence, she could see the skepticism in Detective Harris's eyes begin to fade. Witness after witness had corroborated her story, detailing how Jake had aggressively confronted her, disregarding her identity and authority. It's alarming to see a pattern of behavior like this, Harris remarked, glancing at the notes he had taken. We'll need to interview these witnesses. Good, Maya replied firmly. It's crucial that we address this not only for my sake, but for the community's trust in law enforcement. Days passed, and the media buzz around Maya's case escalated. Local news reporters camped outside her office, eager to capture her thoughts on the growing public outcry. During one interview, a journalist asked, Judge Johnson, how do you feel knowing that your experience has ignited a movement? Maya paused, her heart swelling with pride and apprehension. I feel grateful that my story resonates with others, but it's not just about me. It's about dismantling systemic racism and ensuring that every individual, regardless of their race, is treated with dignity and respect. The rally arrived, and as she stood backstage, anticipation crackled in the air. She could hear the crowd chanting for justice, their voices merging into a powerful chorus. Stepping onto the stage, the sea of faces before her was both daunting and empowering. Thank you for being here today, she began, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. We are gathered not just in protest, but in solidarity. We must stand together to hold those in power accountable for their actions. The crowd erupted in applause, their support bolstering her confidence. Just as she began to delve deeper into her narrative, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows, Officer Jake Thompson. He moved through the crowd, his expression unreadable. Maya felt her heart drop as their eyes met. Jake, she called out, her voice slicing through the noise. The crowd quieted, sensing the tension. I never wanted this confrontation, but your actions have consequences. You've perpetuated a system that dehumanizes people based on the color of their skin. How can you justify that? Jake's face flushed, a mix of anger and shame. I was just doing my job, Judge. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to what? Maya interjected, her voice rising. Didn't mean to racially profile me? Didn't mean to humiliate me in front of your colleagues? Your biases cost me my dignity, and they cost countless others their lives and freedom. The crowd murmured, some gasping at her boldness. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but the words faltered. This isn't just about you and me, Jake. It's about the systemic issues plaguing our society. We all have a role to play in creating change. Maya stepped closer, her voice unwavering. I hope one day you understand the weight of your actions. With that, she turned back to the crowd, igniting a renewed sense of purpose. The rally continued, the energy palpable as Maya led them in chants for justice, each word resonating with the collective pain and hope of the community. The day of the public hearing arrived with a heavy air of anticipation hanging over the community center. Judge Maya Johnson stood in front of a packed room, her heart racing as she prepared to testify against Officer Jake Thompson. The walls were adorned with banners calling for justice, and the audience buzzed with a mix of hope and apprehension. As she took her place at the witness stand, she could feel the weight of countless eyes upon her, each filled with expectation. Maya cleared her throat, her voice steady but resolute. I stand here today not just for myself, but for every individual who has faced discrimination and injustice. My experience in that restaurant was not an isolated incident. It is part of a larger pattern that must be addressed. The room fell silent, and she continued, as a judge, I've dedicated my career to upholding the law and ensuring fairness. What happened that night was a blatant disregard for those principles. Across the room, Jake sat with his shoulders slumped, his face pale. He had once worn his badge with pride, but now it felt like a weight dragging him down. The internal affairs officers had made it clear. The investigation had unearthed more than just his misconduct. As Maya testified, the evidence of corruption within the police department began to unfold in its entirety. Officer Thompson's actions that evening were not only unprofessional, they were rooted in a deep-seated bias that he failed to acknowledge. Maya pressed on, her voice gaining strength. I've been in this community long enough to know that I am not the first person to suffer because of such prejudices. We cannot allow this to continue. A murmur rippled through the audience. People nodded in agreement, feeling the pulse of Maya's words resonate with their own experiences. A local activist, Marcus, stood up, raising his voice. Thank you, Judge Johnson. We need more leaders like you who are willing to stand up against this systemic issue. Maya smiled softly at Marcus, appreciating the support. She continued, when I left that restaurant, I could have chosen to remain silent, but I realized that silence only perpetuates the cycle of injustice. We must speak out, demand accountability, and strive for change. As Maya spoke, the hearing room was filled with the palpable sense of a community rallying together. Officers from the Internal Affairs Division exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from skepticism to respect. They had witnessed the courage it took for her to be there, fully aware of the risks involved in challenging the very system that was supposed to protect her. After Maya's testimony, the Internal Affairs officer, a seasoned woman named Sergeant Linda Gray, approached the microphone. The investigation has uncovered not only Officer Thompson's misconduct, but also a broader issue of corruption within our department. We will be pursuing charges against several officers involved in this scandal, and we are committed to restoring trust within our community. The crowd erupted in applause, a mix of relief and hope flooding the room. As the hearing drew to a close, the chair of the Community Council stood to address the audience. We want to recognize Judge Maya Johnson for her bravery and commitment to justice. It takes immense courage to stand up and speak out, and we are proud to award her the Community Leadership Honor. Maya felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes as she accepted the recognition. Thank you, but this is not just about me, she said, her voice thick with emotion. This is about all of us working together to ensure that our community becomes a safer, more equitable place for everyone. As the hearing concluded, Jake was escorted out of the room, his future uncertain. The whispers of the crowd followed him, a mix of disdain and pity. He had thought his badge would shield him from the consequences of his actions, but reality had a way of catching up to those who wielded power irresponsibly. In the days that followed, the news of the hearing spread like wildfire. Maya's bravery became a beacon of hope, inspiring many to come forward with their own stories of injustice. The community began to mobilize, demanding a thorough investigation into the police department, advocating for reforms that would prevent such abuses of power in the future. Maya stood at the forefront of this movement, her heart swelling with purpose. This is just the beginning, she thought, ready to fight for the dignity and justice that every individual deserved. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, and watch this next story that's very exciting.